wife, her cousin, and I decided to camp out one weekend and go squirrel hunting. We packed our tent, got our food and water and tools ready, and I cleaned and checked my Remington Mohawk and my Savage Stevens, and then we took off. We got to the campsite and cleared a space for the tent and the fire pit. We gathered some firewood and got to cooking and talking, and when we finished eating supper, we heard bipedal footsteps somewhere nearby in the woods. As we sat there in silence and listened to it walk around us, my wife's cousin and I exchanged a look. We both knew what it was. We'd seen its kind before. On another hunting trip at that campsite, we ran into an entire clan of boogers. Based on our last encounter with them, I wanted them to know that we were armed, so I fired a warning shot into the hillside and the walking stopped. 2 hours later, we heard more heavy footsteps. I fired another warning shot into the hillside and again it stopped. Another hour passed uneventfully, but at 1 a.m., the whooping started. My wife and I had been sleeping in the tent, but her cousin chose to stay outside by the fire. "Do y'all see this?" I heard him whisper outside. I joined him by the fire pit and I saw something up on the ridge about 30 yards away. And then, with no warning, all hell broke loose. There was whooping and whistling, and a group of them ran through the woods around us, making as much noise as they could. We decided it was time to leave camp, and it only took us minutes to pack up, but it took a good 30 minutes to get out of there because we had crappy flashlights. That was a long 30 minutes. Soon it will be deer season. My wife's cousin and I are going back up there for another weekend to fill the freezer. Wish me luck. I'd like to stay anonymous, but if you don't mind, please say hi to Jenny King. She's a big fan of yours and she watches every episode. Jenny King. I went to grade school with a girl named Jenny King. Matter of fact, I read this cold and I just saw that name. I was in love with that girl. She was I think we were in 6th grade. I think she may have been the first girl I ever kissed. I remember it now. We were at a skating rink and you got picked to go in and hand out skates and all. And it was like a school gym and they had roller skates that they gave out and they would pick students to This is so crazy. This is all coming back to me. Well, where you gave skates out to everybody, you were cool if you worked in the skate handout behind the counter. That was cool. Her and I were working that, and we were very back in the back rack pulling skates. And we had been kind of talking, and I kind of got the undercurrent. Maybe she liked me. And I couldn't help it. I just leaned over and kissed her. And it wasn't a big, long, passionate kiss. Hell, I didn't even know how to kiss. Oh, this is so crazy. And anyway, we may have gone steady for about 2 days, and then I thought, or maybe she thought, she wanted to be free again, so we just didn't do that anymore. Jenny King. Anyway, Memphis, Tennessee. I wonder if she would ever remember that, or if this is the same Jenny King. I don't know where this is. I don't remember. No, I don't see anything in here where this, anyway, y'all, I'm sorry. This caught me by surprise. You know what's funny? I remember I used to call her. We called and talked for about a week, and I remembered her phone number for about 10 years. I can't remember it now, but kind of a sweet memory. And if it's the same one, hope your life turned out great. Mine sure did. And hope you're happy and got a house full of kids and grandkids. All right, thanks to the writer for sending the story. I know I didn't talk about the story. I just talked about my first girlfriend, but that was pretty great. It was great to go down that lane. Thanks for the story. Hey, everybody. Sorry I've been gone so long. I've been busy at work. Matter of fact, I've been busier in the month of March than I think I've been in the last 10 years. But I'm winding down on some work. I've got one other thing to do in April, but it's not quite as pressurized. And then I'm hoping this spring and summer will be the season of podcasts. Might be able to do them every other day, but that's where I'm at. So welcome to the Dixie Cryptid channel, where there are no memberships. Everybody's a member. Everything's free. You get to listen for no charge, and if you don't like it, I'll send you your money back. How yak at? All right, guys, thanks for joining me. I've got several more stories to go. Let's get it rolling. All right, here we go. This is a nice story about a Bigfoot, and I know the women like these stories, and I do too. I like them too. Some of the guys like them too. So, and if I have to stop, y'all, I've got my door open because the weather is so pretty outside, and I've got about a half a dozen chickens just kind of loitering right in the threshold of my door. I'm sitting here looking at them. They're so pretty and happy. Anyway, let's read this nice story about a Bigfoot. In late June of 1979, my family and I spent a week at Salt Creek Resort in Lake Shasta. It was late afternoon, but the sun was still high in the sky. 6 or 8 of us kids from the boat club were exploring around the cabins when we saw what looked like a dark, tall person far off in the woods. What was peculiar about it was it had something yellow and blue on top of its head. It was maybe part of a bikini just above where its eyes would be. What? We chased after it, but it was moving twice as fast as us. We saw it hide behind a big tree and then reappear 50 feet further away behind another tree. At one point, one of the older boys railed us together since we were too spread out and separated, and it took us a while to get back to the cabins. We all felt more than a little confused because we had traveled so far in such a short period of time. None of it made any sense. On the way back, we found the younger boy's orange-clad action figure in a U.S. Army canvas bag that was buckled closed. We also found a towel from one of the girls in the group, which she had wrapped over her shoulder when we went chasing after that thing. But something wasn't right. We all knew the towel had just been on her shoulder a minute before, yet there it was, hanging from a tree branch 14 feet in the air, nowhere close to where we were when we decided to turn back. It would have been impossible for her to climb up that tree on her own and hang the towel there. It took the 2 oldest boys and the oldest girl and me to boost her high enough up to get a hold of the branch and then climb out and grab that towel. Well, we kept walking, and we passed a massive patch of giant loganberries. We all snacked on them, and by the time we got back to the resort, it was dark. A day or two later, my middle brother, the towel girl, and I went after some more of those loganberries we had snacked on the other day. We found the same massive patch a lot closer to the cabins than we remembered. The 3 of us had 2 buckets about a quarter full when a 10-inch round rock landed in the woods behind us. We concluded it was the other kids, and we looked around for them. But we couldn't see them, so we kept picking the berries. That's when we heard the weirdest sound. It was a cross between a coyote howl and a pissed-off parrot, and it was so loud that we felt it. And then another rock landed between me and my brother. We found the same massive patch a lot closer to the cabins than we remembered. The 3 of us had 2 buckets about a quarter full when a 10-inch rock landed in the woods behind us. We thought that it was the other kids and looked around for them, but we couldn't see them, so we kept picking berries. That's when we heard the weirdest sound. It was a cross between a coyote howl and a pissed-off parrot. It was so loud that we felt it. And then another rock landed between me and my brother. This one was bigger. It was 30 inches long and 18 inches wide. It was closer to a boulder than a rock. And we exchanged a look, and we beat it back to the resort. The next morning, I got in trouble. There was a hole in the window screen of our cabin, and berries were smashed all over our mattress and my sleeping bag as if I'd rolled over onto a pile of them while I was sleeping. Towel Girl was in trouble too. Her swimsuit and the top half of her mom's bikini were missing. They were blue and yellow, just like we had seen on that thing's head the other day. They had a broken screen too, and there was a pile of berries on the outdoor table that stained the tablecloth. What we saw wasn't ape-like at all. It was gracefully fast and I think impishly playful. My middle brother says he doesn't remember it, but he's agitated whenever he hears our local coyotes. Towel Girl wants nothing to do with those memories. She says that noise haunts her dreams to this day. Oh, that was cool. A Bigfoot stealing mom's swimsuit and wearing it on his head. There's probably some dudes around that might do that. That's, never mind. I won't even go down that road. This was a cool story. It was a playful, kind of a fun Bigfoot story. I appreciate it. Appreciate the man for sending it. Thanks. All right, this isn't a monster story, but it's really good. It's kind of a heartwarming little story. It's short, and I think you'll like this. When I was a teenager, I worked as a summer staffer at a religious conference center in the mountains of East Asheville, North Carolina. Being from Florida and my friend from Oklahoma, we enjoyed the lush mountains when we had time off. One late afternoon, we decided to climb a mountain with a lookout spot facing the northwest. We wanted to see the sunset. We started hiking later than usual, knowing the sunset was coming and it would be dark soon. I'm not sure why, but we didn't even think about taking flashlights. It was the 1970s and there were no cell phones with lights on them to help us find our way. It was a beautiful afternoon, and as we watched the sunset over the mountains, time got away from us. We realized just how dark it was getting and knew that it was time to start the hike back down. The upper half of the hike was a regular trail, but it led on to an old logging road, which was much easier hiking. It was so dark by the time we started our hike down the mountain that we had to hold on to each other's hand just to know that we hadn't lost each other. After only a couple of minutes, we stopped and realized that we were not on the trail anymore. We became frightened at the thought that we would be forced to spend the night on the mountain with no supplies or food. In our desperation, we prayed for help. And just as we ended the prayer, we looked up and we saw a bush with a light streaking through it from top to bottom. It wasn't enough light to illuminate the area around it, but it was enough to guide us toward it. And when we reached it, we realized we were back on the trail. Believe it or not, this happened to us 3 times before we made our way down to the old logging road and back to safety. Now, they say God works in mysterious ways, and I, for one, believe that. Oh, that's a good story. That's a miracle. Those are miracle things that happen with people. Sometimes they only happen once in a lifetime. Sometimes they happen for people over and over. I believe what this girl said, that sometimes you can pray for help and sometimes God will answer. It's according to his will. And if he hadn't shown you the light, he wanted to keep you on that mountain for a night to teach you something, but it's all good. It's all for our good. So I love this story. Now, sometimes we get stories that aren't monster stories. Matter of fact, I asked a couple of months ago for some dog stories. I've got a whole pile of dog stories, and I'm going to do in one episode soon, probably in the next couple of weeks. And so I enjoyed this. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the writer. All right, here's a story a man sent me. It's called A Creature in the Snow. It's got some mystery to it. Claims this is true, so hang on. In the winter of 1976, I lived on a mountain pass in Washington State, and I worked at a restaurant and bar that has since burnt down. Back then, there were 4 ski areas on that pass, and I lived a mile from the restaurant on the summit, halfway into a narrow valley that ended in another one of the ski areas. And when the snow came, I left my car at my parents' house 50 miles away in town, and I walked everywhere on the pass. It was much easier than having to shovel out all of the snow in the winter. The last quarter mile to my chalet was a path I made straight up a steep hill. And on one side of the path were stairs I stomped into the snow, and on the other side was a slide. The path was steep enough that you could squat and slide down on the soles of your boots. I usually worked until 2:30 a.m., but they didn't turn the ski area lights off until 3. Most of the time you could see pretty well, but not into the thick forest that the few scattered homes were nestled into. The restaurant had a room at the back of the building, access from the outside where we kept the garbage. We had had problems with black bears breaking into it, so the Forest Service placed a cage there to try to catch and relocate the troublemakers. I didn't think twice about walking or hiking anywhere anytime while I was living there. I don't even know if they made bear spray back then, but my overconfident self wasn't going to let a bear keep me from doing what I loved. And I told myself that if I made noise and tried to look as big as I could, most things would just run away. We were blessed with lots of snow in a storm that came in, and they closed the pass until they could plow and do avalanche control. The other restaurant and 2 gas stations and the combined post office, grocery store all closed early, but I was tending bar at the time and the locals hung around enjoying some peace without the intrusion of skiers. After work, I was really looking forward to the amazing walk ahead of me, having the pass all to myself. The snowflakes were big and beautiful, and they were coming down hard. I had a waterproof hooded poncho big enough to cover my backpack, too, and it got really warm under there when I was walking, so I was in no hurry. What I didn't expect was for everything to be so deserted. Everyone had gone to their warm fireplaces and shut themselves in, so it was just me and the mountains and all the beautiful snow. And then the ski lights went out. There were street lights right on the summit, but once I turned into my little valley, it got pretty dark. The snow was reflective, which helped, and there was a good-sized berm on either side of the small 2-lane road. I knew I wouldn't get lost, but being in the middle of the mountain wilderness in the pitch dark, all by myself, did take some of the fun out of my trek. The only lights came from the porches of the chalets scattered along 1 or 2 short roads, like the one I lived on, which was on a hill rather than near the road. Now, heavy snow muffles noise and has a way of cutting you off from everything else. As I continued my trek home, I thought I heard something in the woods next to me, just far enough in that I couldn't see what it was. It sounded like something heavy had leaped out of the trees and landed in the 4-foot snow. Well, I knew not to run, because there were mountain lions and lynxes and bears and lots of animals in those woods. But whatever it was sounded much bigger. What could jump high enough up out of 4 feet of snow and make such a crashing sound when it landed? Well, I tried to stay calm and I kept going forward. The deep snow that had seemed so awesome earlier in the night had suddenly become more of a trap. I couldn't run in it, and the closest house was too far away. I wouldn't be able to make it there before the creature got me. And then I heard another crash, and I heard it leap again and land not far from me. It stayed out of sight in the woods, but I could hear it following me. I moved as fast as I dared, dreading having to go up that path on the hill to my house. I felt like I was being toyed with, and I heard it crash through the trees, keeping up with me, but I stayed calm. There was nothing else I could do. Even if I screamed, no one would be able to hear me. And it was so dark that I had to use my hands to feel my way up the hill, all the while waiting for something to jump on my back and sink its teeth and claws into me. Halfway up the hill, the trees weren't as close together, and I was hoping it would stop following me for fear of exposing itself. And when I finally saw the deck of my house ahead of me, I flung myself forward with all of my might and nearly took the door down trying to get inside. The next day, I set out at daylight to go back to work. There was a thick blanket of fresh, beautiful snow and an entirely different journey in the sunlight. But as soon as I got down to the path and the trees, I heard those sounds again. Crash and thumps and crashes. I froze in fear, realizing whatever it was had told its friends, and they were all about to rip me to pieces. And then it occurred to me all at once. The sound was coming from the trees. All of that beautiful heavy snow was falling off the heavy-laden tall fir branches. Each time I passed by a tree, I could hear the snow fall. It only sounded like something was following me because every several steps I took, another tree would lose its load of snow. I have to say, I was pretty happy with myself for staying calm and not trying to run. It goes to show that some bumps in the night really are just our imagination. Okay, this is one I actually read before I recorded it. Rebecca, the woman that edits my stories, she had a note up here that this is not really a creature story, and that he thought what he thought was following him was just snow falling from the trees. There's no actual monsters. In case you want to put it in a different category. And she said, but it was still a good story, and that's the truth. It was a great story. And you have to wonder how many times people have thought Bigfoot was following them when it was totally something else, like snow falling off of trees. Who knows? I don't know, but it could happen. This story is proof of that. Thank you to the writer for sending this. It was great. All right, this is a show enough story about Bigfoot. Here's what the writer writes. One night when my brother was younger, he had just been dropped off near his tree stand to go hunting. To get there, he had to walk by an old abandoned school, which our father had attended when he was little. As he was walking through the rubble of the old school, he heard two sticks being hit together. Then he heard a scream like a man was getting torn apart. When he took his flashlight out and went into the woods to check it out, he saw a 12-foot tall creature there staring back at him with yellow-orange eyes. My brother ran as fast as he could, hearing this thing chasing him the whole time. And when he made it to his tree stand, he pointed a shotgun at the creature and he shot it. The creature let out a horrible scream and disappeared back into the night. And when he got back to our Nana and Pop's house later, he kept his mouth closed. He told me that he was afraid that they would tell our parents and that they wouldn't let him hunt there anymore. When I was in the first grade, my family and I were on our way home after a visit to my grandfather Sonny's house for Christmas break. During the drive, a car ahead of us crashed out of the blue with nothing in front of it. My dad stopped the car and my parents went to check on the driver while we kids stayed in the car. I remember seeing a dent on the side of the car that looked like a footprint. And then we heard a scream from somewhere off the side of the road in the forest. My parents said it was just a coyote, but the way they quickly got back in the car and kept driving made me think it must have been something else. They didn't tell us what happened to the car that crashed, they just kept driving. After a few minutes, I fell asleep in the back. And in my dream, I saw something following our car, something tall and dark, running on two legs and coming after us. When I woke up, I thought of my dream and I looked through the window behind me. Sure enough, something was following the car, something tall and dark and running on two legs. It terrified me. It was too dark to tell what it was, and I was too scared to say anything. Looking back, I'm almost positive it was Bigfoot. Well, if you're going full speed that's the end of his story, by the way. If you're going full speed in a car and you look back and something's running after you, is it keeping up with the car? Man, these things must be fast. I would say, yeah, if it's big and dark and running really fast and keeping up with the car right behind you, I think you're right. It may have been Bigfoot, but these were great stories. It's two Bigfoot stories from one writer. I thought it was really cool that he sent this in. It was to the point and really good. Thank you to the writer. Okay, here's one that I thought was really cool. I enjoyed the way it's a woman who sent the email, and I enjoyed the way she wrote it. Settle down now and let's listen to a spooky story because this is good. It was a summer night in small town Kansas in 1980. I was 16 years old. I lived in a mobile home with my mom, my stepdad, and my little brother. We had just moved there from southeast Ohio. My mom wanted to move somewhere new, and she had a friend in that small town. I had one friend that I had met at school. Her name was Sandy, and she had a car. She would take me riding around with her now and then, and I loved it. On one particular evening, she dropped me off just before dark. My family was not home, so I sat on the old couch that we had outside on the ground at the back end of the mobile home near the fence. It was just after sunset, but it wasn't dark out yet. The fence bordered a large pasture on the other side. I was sitting on that old couch when something caught my eye. I got up and walked to the fence line, and I went numb. I was in shock and disbelief, and my head spun, and for a minute, I could not move. I heard a car coming, and thank God it was my family. I ran over to the car, and I told them what I saw crawling away in the field. My mom believed me, and she even drew a picture of what I had described. And my mother passed away in 2011, but through the years, we discussed this many times. Only by luck did I see it because it blended in with the tall, dry grass in the field. What I saw was silent and long and crawling away fast like a spider. I never saw hands or feet. I didn't see ears or a tail. I only saw tangled, matted hair and strange humps covering its whole body. Its rear end was not sticking up like a human's would if it were trying to walk with its hands and feet. After that night, we had rocks thrown at our trailer on multiple occasions. My little brother heard something outside the trailer sometimes, and the next morning we would find claw marks cut into the screens. There were cattle mutilations in the area, and other teenagers witnessed several strange creatures standing in front of the old barn in the pasture at night. One night, my mom's friend who lived close to us saw bright red eyes from the fence line while she was doing dishes. Another neighbor said she was going to call the FBI, and a week later, she up and moved away. Sincerely, and she signs off on the letter. This is cool. To me, the best part of this story is they had an old couch out in the yard next to the field. I would love to, I think I'm going to find me an old couch and just put it out in my yard. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. That would be, if you could just keep all the bugs and rats out of it, that would be a pretty good thing. Maybe I should just get some lawn furniture. I don't know. And I'm just kidding around. This was really a good story. This person saw something crawling away, and the first thing I thought, I think she's seeing something long and spindly crawl away like a spider. But I've heard stories of Bigfoots getting down and crawling on all fours. I've also heard stories of Bigfoots camouflaging themselves. This thing could have stuck things in his fur like a sniper will with a ghillie suit and tried to blend in with his surrounding and could have been crawling away. I don't know. She said it was dark, so it wasn't like totally camouflaged with the grass. I don't know. I didn't see it. And the description is it's a little lacking, but it's enough to be a scary story. Anyway, I thought this was great. Thank you to the writer for sending it. It was really good. Thank you. Okay, this has been a podcast for, most of these stories have been kind of lighthearted and not scary, but this one is different. This one is one, if you like the hard-hitting Sasquatch stories, you're going to like this one. In 1974, on a Marine Corps base in North Carolina, 4 other men and I encountered 4 Sasquatches. The 5 of us were Marines, some of whom had served multiple tours in Vietnam. To say that we were not easily intimidated would be putting it lightly. That said, I have never been as scared in Vietnam as I was on that day. It was early spring and the fishing on base was really good. We parked our cars off the road and walked a mile on a rail line to a bridge that went across a small river. In the middle of the river was a small island. Now, we had fished off the bridge and on the island several times before and had always been successful catching bass and catfish. It was swampy with mostly tall brush and grass, although a few larger trees were standing on the banks on both sides of the river. The brush was at least 10 feet high and was so thick that you couldn't see more than a few feet into it. That afternoon, the 5 of us were at our spot having a great time and catching fish when everything got real quiet. No birds, no animals, or bugs. and down the river from us, we watched a large branch get launched into the river. We started commenting on where that branch could have come from and what had been strong enough to throw it in. And then we heard something massive walk through the brush along the riverbank. It sounded like it was walking on 2 feet, and we could hear it breaking small trees with each step, and we saw the tall brush sway out of the way as it made its way through. At first, it was slow, but when it got closer to the train tracks, it sped up. We had all been in Vietnam. We were all too familiar with what it took to get through a dense jungle and vegetation. There was no way a human could have gotten through that tall brush with such speed and ease, not to mention that any human in their right mind would stay out of there. It was riddled with snakes, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes and copperheads, just to name a few. We heard this thing run through the brush toward the tracks and stop just short of coming into the open, and then run back toward a thick tree that had a fork in the middle, 8 feet off the ground. And then it did it again and again, repeating this strange charge toward the train tracks, only to stop short of coming out and exposing itself. There we sat, 5 combat veterans who had each seen some rough times in Vietnam, each of us more than a little worried. One of the men suggested it was a bear, but being that I had spent my life in the woods hunting bear and deer, I knew it wasn't a bear. They were scary, but they weren't as coordinated as this thing sounded, and they didn't run on 2 feet. Just as I told the others this, it let out a scream so loud it hit us like a gust of wind. It went deep into our chests and vibrated. It was like nothing I had ever heard. One of the men picked up a large rock lying on the railroad track bed and chunked it into the trees. The creature went silent for a moment in response, and then let out another scream even louder than the first. Then a response came from downstream on the opposite side of the river. Like the first creature, this second one ran toward the railroad, slowly at first, and then it sped up. It stopped just short of being seen and ran back into the woods, and then the first one did the same, and now we had 2 of these unseen creatures to deal with. They seemed to be taking turns, turning toward the train tracks. A couple of the other men picked up large rocks and chucked them into the direction of the creatures in the bush. Well, I told them to knock it off, knowing it would take a lot more than a rock to stop whatever these things were, and not wanting to really make them mad. We decided the best thing that we could do was go onto the island in the middle of the river. At least it would give us a little time to prepare should they actually come onto the tracks to get us. This bluff attack of theirs continued for 15 minutes with intermittent screams coming from both sides of the river. At one point, near the large tree with a fork in it, we finally saw what it was. This thing was over 8 feet tall, and it had to be 4 feet wide at the shoulders. It raised its head above the fork of the large tree with a flat face and rust-colored hair. It was so wide that its shoulders stuck out on each side of the tree. It was nothing like a bear. It was not an ape, and it was too large to be a human. This had to be a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, or whatever you call it. The first one let out one more scream, and it sounded different than the ones it made before. And then both creatures tore off into the brush, heading downstream away from us. We heard 2 more of these creatures. They tore out of the same area the others had been, and they went upriver. When we heard them run off, it occurred to me that the 2 making all the noise might have been trying to scare us into the path of the 2 who were hiding, like dogs chasing their prey right into the hunters. We waited in silence for half an hour just to make sure everything had calmed down, and we got our gear and got the hell out of there. We had to walk a mile on the railroad tracks back to our cars. We were worried they may double back on us. It was the longest mile I had ever walked, and it was the last time I ever went back to this spot to fish. Once we were back in our cars, we agreed not to say anything about this to anyone, worried about what it would do to our careers in the service. We figured that the Marine Corps would just kick us out for being crazy or accuse us of being on drugs. So we never spoke of what happened after that. I trained as a sniper in the Marine Corps, and the one thing that becoming a sniper teaches you beyond shooting your rifle is that you have to be extremely articulate about what you see. Your life depends on being able to describe what you see with extreme accuracy. It can mean the difference between life and death. Now, these things were Bigfoots. They were something I never wanted to see again. And unfortunately, I got out of the Marines and went back to Washington State, and there I had another experience. It was a little less intimidating, but nonetheless an experience that I could have done without. I now live in Oregon near Mount Hood, and although I've heard that there are a lot of Bigfoot encounters in this area, I have been fortunate enough not to have seen any more of these things. I wish more people were aware of the danger they put themselves in when they go out in nature's playground. If you go prepared and pay attention to your surroundings. Yes, there may be some friendly, happy occurrences, but ours was neither happy nor friendly. Bigfoot is real. He's cunning and he can be dangerous. For those who want to encounter these things, I have but one thing to say. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And then he goes on to say, feel free to use his name. I'm too old to care about what people think, and I know what I saw. Anyway, his name's Dennis. And this was a good story. Him and 4 Marines out fishing encounter 4 Bigfoots. There's nothing I can add to this that's even funny or comical or adds anything to the story. It just is what it is. The man had an encounter. Him and his buddies had an encounter with a pack of Sasquatches. Now that's pretty cool. I know it scared them, but to us, it's pretty cool. Thanks, Dennis, for the story. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you very much. And I guess we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for listening. See you then.